The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 12 baseball players, in particular Bryce Harper and his invalid brother Fanatic. It was all the more tragic that they were young, but had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer classic became a nightmare. The events of that day were to lead to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of baseball history, the Texas All-Star Game.
When Hank comes to the plate, ball, you're gonna be out late. So goodbye, Mr. Ball, goodbye.
After the start of the All-Star Game in 1933, the first MVP to miss a selection would only have to wait until 1935, when Detroit first baseman Hank Greenberg would fail to beat out fan favorite Lou Gehrig halfway through the season. While looking at their stats prior to the exhibition game, Greenberg had hit 25 home runs, 101 RBIs, and had an OPS of 1.062, while Gehrig had appeared to be in a slump for his standards with 11 home runs, 51 RBIs, and an OPS of 975. Gehrig's numbers were still Hall of Fame caliber, but it should be noted this would be sandwiched between 3 seasons in which he sported an OPS greater than 1.1. At the time, the lineups were selected by the managers of each league's representative team, and even with Detroit's own player manager Mickey Cochran picking the squad, he still chose the Iron Horse over his own first baseman. Greenberg would, however, get the last laugh as he would continue the second half in a semi-consistent manner, exchanging power for a more contact on base stat line, dropping his slugging by 0.09 points while raising his on base percentage by 0.04 points. Gehrig would, however, drastically uptick his performance by jumping his OPS from 975 in the first half to 1.120 in the second, coming more in line with his ability in the surrounding years. Detroit would beat the Yankees with 93 to 89 wins for the pennant to go on to face the Cubs in the World Series. Greenberg would unfortunately break his wrist in Game 2 and be sidelined for the rest of the series, yet the Tigers were still able to beat the Cubs in 6 games. He would be named regular season MVP, and while looking at the numbers, you could argue Gehrig snubbed him for the All-Star appearance, while Greenberg snubbed Gehrig for the MVP. It's quite an interesting case of 2 players snubbing one another in just the same season.
It's time to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of gum.
The next non-All-Star MVP would come in 1956 with Don Newcombe. Unlike Greenberg being beat out by a single inner circle Hall of Famer, he would have to be beat out by an entire rotation. At the time, the concept of a relief pitcher was still very new, and while both the AL and the NL teams that year would carry what I would consider a true relief pitcher, all the rest of the spots were held by pitchers who started the majority of their appearances. Ignoring Clem Labine due to him only appearing in relief that season, Don Newcombe would beat out 2 of the 6 starting pitchers chosen ahead of him in ERA, and even have a better winning percentage than all but Brooks Lawrence, who had yet to receive a losing decision that season with 12 wins in 16 starts. The great Hall of Famer Robin Roberts would be appearing in his last All-Star game at just the age of 29 with an ERA of .428 and a record of 8-10 in 18 starts. I think you could argue Newcombe deserved an appearance, but this was the year before fan voting would be banned, as in 1957 Reds fans would elect 7 of their position players before Commissioner Ford Frick vetoed 2 of the selections and discontinued fan voting. With this in mind, it makes more sense to be overshadowed by a future Hall of Famer going into the season on a 6-year All-Star streak. The NL All-Star team would be so stacked with talent that their bench alone would see greats such as Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Ernie Banks, Eddie Matthews, and Duke Snider. While Newcombe was off to a nice, but not all-time worthy season, he would truly make his mark in the second half. From July 13th onward, he sported a .264 ERA with an outstanding 16-2 record in decisions over the course of the rest of the year. Not only would he walk away with the MVP that year, but also be the first ever receiver of the Cy Young Award, as just 1 pitcher was chosen for the honor until 1967. He would end up being the losing pitcher in Game 7 of the World Series that year after Yogi Berra hit 2 home runs to put the Yankees over the Dodgers 9-0. This would also be Jackie Robinson's last game before retiring that offseason. But fortunately, the team won the prior year to see Robinson win 1 World Series in his career. Newcombe would play in the Negro Leagues, serve in the military during the Korean War, go to the major leagues, and end his career after playing 1 season as a primary first baseman in the MPB with Larry Doby, saying his only mistake was not coming back to Japan to play more. Pirates fans would miss both of their back-to-back MVPs at the summer ball games in 1978 and 1979, as Dave Parker and Willie Stargell would find themselves with 1 All-Star game and 1 MVP each in this 2-year stretch, just not getting both of the awards in the same year. Parker and Stargell were 2 of the stars from the We Are Family Pirates, which I will say Sister Sledge has multiple better songs, and it's unfortunate they're only remembered by many for just this one. The pair were at opposite ends of their career, as in 1979 would be Stargell's last full year playing at the age of 39, and 1978 would be Dave Parker's 6th campaign in the beginning of his 19-year career. Dave Parker would begin the 1978 season with a very good slash line at .316, .377, and .536 with 13 home runs. According to Society for American Baseball Research, he missed the All-Star game due to injury, even though he had played 71 of his team's 81 games till that point, and the NL All-Star roster already had selected Johnny Bench, who didn't participate due to injury. By this time, the outfield selection had moved from left, center, and right specific to just the best outfielders regardless of exact position. But the starting right fielder would be Pirates outfielder Richie Zisk, with a slash line of .271, .348, and .438 with 13 home runs. It's hard to say Parker didn't deserve a selection with 7 other outfielders on the roster, plus Carl Yastrzemski, who while playing the majority of his career in the outfield, would get selected as a first baseman that year. Parker let this motivate him, as with an already solid first half, he would only get better with a 1.042 OPS in the second half with 17 home runs to help the Pirates to an 88-73 record. The following year would see Stargell and Parker switch roles, as Parker would find his way to the All-Star game, while Willie missed 24 games before the All-Star game, while producing at a very high level with 18 home runs and a .976 OPS. Steve Garvey would get the start at first, with a lesser stat line of .837 and 14 home runs, while playing 93 games. 32 more games already at the All-Star break. I have mentioned Stargell's MVP in a previous video, but it had the lowest RWAR of all MVP seasons, mostly due to only playing 126 games. He would, however, win the NLCS MVP and the World Series MVP that year, and the Pirates marched to a World Series win against the Orioles in 7 games. The next player is perhaps the most famous non-All-Star MVP in Kirk Gibson, who would never once in his career attend the Summer Classic, yet came away with the 1988 MVP award. After receiving MVP votes for the Tigers in 1981, 1984, and 1985, Kirk would leave Detroit for LA, where he would win both the Silver Slugger and MVP in just his first year with the team. When the Dodgers signed him, Tommy Lasorda called him a bulldog, and throughout his career he was seen as one of the grittiest competitors on the diamond. He would actually be selected to 2 All-Star games in his career, in 1985 and his MVP season in 1988, but would decline both times to enjoy the break in the middle of the season. He would move throughout the outfield in his career, primarily fielding in the corners, and would have explosiveness both in his bat and in his legs. This is a less notable inclusion to the list, not due to a lack of talent, but due to him having the opportunity to attend the game and choosing not to do so. 1988 would also see one of the most legendary World Series moments ever by him. After injuring his left hamstring and right knee in the NLCS, Gibson would watch Game 1 of the World Series from the clubhouse in shorts, icing his injured legs. In the 8th inning, the legendary Vin Scully noted he would most likely be unable to pinch hit, and this motivated him to get up and take some swings off a tee. And then, after being called upon by his team on 2 bad legs, down by 1 with 2 outs, and in a full count, he would deliver baseball history. This would be his only at-bat in the World Series with the Dodgers to help them beat the A's 4-1, which could have gone very differently if the A's had walked away with the Game 1 victory. Like I mentioned earlier, his addition on this list is just to him opting out of the game, but his 1988 season is one of the most critiqued MVP selections in the history of the game. Even Vin Scully mentioned their MVP was more Tinkerbell than anything. While it is a regular season award, I think he delivered one of the most valuable at-bats in the history of baseball in Game 1 that year. The Society for American Baseball Research noted that he played every baseball game like it was football. He ran and played hard, truly pushing his body to the limit, as throughout his career he would find himself on the injured list from playing at 100%. He would win 2 World Series, one with the Dodgers and one with the Tigers, and has not one but 2 of the most iconic home runs in World Series history off of Hall of Fame pitchers in Goose Gossage and Dennis Eckersley. He seems to get a lot of criticism for not being a Hall of Famer himself and undeserving of the MVP, but I think there are very few people who wouldn't want to have the kind of career he did.
Rubber lips are immune to your charms.
After the 70s would end with back-to-back MVPs missing the All-Star game, the 80s would follow suit. Just a year after Kirk Gibson declined his invitation, Robin Yount would not be voted in by fans. To the best of my research, I couldn't find any other reason than him simply not being voted, but please correct me if you know otherwise. Yount is perhaps one of the most overlooked Hall of Famers in the game of baseball, both during and after his career, as he is the Hall of Famer with the least All-Star Game nods, not including those who entered the league later in their career due to segregation. He has more career WAR than Derek Jeter and was the 3rd player to win the MVP at 2 positions, after moving from shortstop to center field. Hank Greenberg, mentioned earlier, would be the first. While some seasons mentioned so far are understandable why the MVP was passed up for the All-Star Game, and others were much closer to them being snubbed, the 1989 season is one of the strangest selections I've ever seen. After Yount would post a solid but maybe not elite slash line before the All-Star Game, Jose Canseco would be selected over him. It could be understood as Canseco was a popular player. He was one of the Bash brothers. When seeing the stats side by side, however, you may be as confused as I was. Yeah. After not playing a single game before the All-Star Game, Jose Canseco would find his way to the All-Star team, while Yount would be left behind. The only explanation I found while researching was it was simply the fans' choice, but if anyone who was watching baseball at the time would know more, please let me know in the comments. It's not uncommon for beloved players late in their careers to get the nod as more of an honorary position, like Reggie Jackson on the Angels, or appointed by the commissioner like Albert Pujols and Miguel Cabrera, but to see a player get a similar treatment at only the age of 24 is pretty shocking. Yount would improve his solid first half with an even better second half to beat out Cal Ripken Jr. for his second MVP. Robin Yount's baseball reference page isn't filled with eye-popping home runs or stolen base numbers, but what he was great at was consistency. For 11 straight years, from ages 24 to 34, he would average a 132 OPS plus and lead all of baseball in total bases in the 80s. He was just a pure hitter who may not have had mammoth home run power, but just put together season after season of elite offensive performances. I will admit that I've been aware of him, but I've never looked into his abilities until this video, and would highly encourage those in the same boat as I was to consider him on par with many of the other great shortstops we have had since his time. I think each of these players had a unique reason on why they missed the All-Star game, whether they were overlooked or simply just didn't deserve it at the time. I really enjoyed learning about these guys, and this is only 6 of the 12 MVPs who missed the All-Star game. So if you guys really liked this video, I would definitely make a part 2 on the other 6. I really appreciate you guys watching, and if there's anything else you'd like to see, please let me know in the comments. If not, I'll see you in the next video.